So I'm Lucy Beaumont. I'm a principal psychologist at Korn, Ferry. And today I'm actually going to be talking to you about how you find your hidden heroes. So why the term hidden heroes? Well, partly I like the idea that there's little Clark Kents running around our organisations by day and then at night wearing capes and fighting crime. But really, that's the term that I think of when I think about those really special people in our companies, the ones that really make a difference, our top performers. And this is really about who are they? They're in all of our organisations and at all levels. We often tend to just focus on the top levels, but actually all the way up from frontline roles, we've got these really high performers and they're making a difference. So how do we understand who they are? We might not even know. And then once we know that, how do we identify what is different about these people to our average or our low performers? If we can understand that and we can template it, we can use that to recruit against and actually bring in more high performers. So I said I'm from Korn Ferry, so many of you may know the Korn Ferry brand, but I actually came into the company via Talent Q, who you may be familiar with or not, but we're a psychometric assessment specialist founded by Roger Holdsworth. But we were acquired by Hay Group, and Hay Group was then acquired by Korn Ferry, and now I forget who I work for, but we're part of the same thing, but my background is in assessments. So, a few things to get through today. First off, just want to look at, do high performers actually make a difference? Is there an ROI on actually bringing in good people? Is it going to bring a difference to our organisation? I'll address a very obvious truth. The world is changing, but actually what does that mean for us, and have we realised all the ways that it's changing for us in recruitment? And then I'm going to share with you some work that we did with Ford, looking at their hidden heroes and how we were able to identify them. So, do high performers really make a difference? Well, there's quite a lot of research out there that indicates that they don't just make a bit of a difference, they make a huge difference. It's often said, and there's a lot of research around this, that actually 20% of your employees are those that really sizzle and really make the difference, and the 80% are the fizzlers. So we want to look at those 20% and actually understand how do we replicate that and how do we increase those numbers. We know that in different roles, different areas of the organisation, they make a bigger difference. So in operational roles, high performers make about a 40% difference over and above average performers. So that's not even the people that are poor performers or low performers. Those that are average compared to those that are high performers bring in about 40% more value to the organisation. When you look at things like sales roles, that leaps up to nearly 70%. So there's definitely value in looking at our high performers and understanding who these hidden heroes are. So the obvious question is, so why don't we recruit more of them? We know they make a difference, we know they're important, we need to find these hidden heroes. First off, it's incredibly difficult to actually bring in high performers. We did some research a couple of years ago that asked recruiters, what's the issue, what's happening? And 37% said that they were knowingly bringing in people that they knew wouldn't be high performers. And we explored that a little bit more, and what they were saying was they were stuck on this recruitment treadmill. So people were leaving, there was high churn, they had to get people in quite quickly, it was all about numbers on seats, and they were recruiting people knowing they were going to fail, but they were targeted against just filling those seats. And I actually had a client at the time who went to talk to about just this, really, and they were working, they had call centres all around the country, and they had incredibly high turnover, which we know happens in call centres. And we talked about this and the issues. They were having a really big impact on customer service. People were leaving really quickly. Managers were getting incredibly frustrated, having to retrain people, always new faces and so on. And it was a huge, huge problem. So we looked at a process, got this all ready, and I said, right, shall we implement it? And he said, no, we've got a problem. And he pointed out the window at a job centre opposite, and he said, when somebody leaves, I walk downstairs, walk across the street, grab someone, bring them back, and put a headset on them. And he said, that is what I've got to do. I don't have the time to break out of this cycle. I just need bums on seats. And that is quite common, and a lot of my clients say that, they're stuck on this recruitment treadmill, and they can't get off of it. It's taking that time to think about, okay, actually, how can we look at this differently? It doesn't need to take a lot of time to do, but unless you break that cycle, you will get stuck within it. Okay, so we know that recruitment assessments, we can actually look at what's a template for good, and we can start to work out who are the good people in our organisations. But actually, whatever we do, it's incredibly hard to predict human behaviour. So there's actually evidence that shows that our brain has increased in size specifically to try and understand how people behave and predict what they're going to do. It's incredibly difficult. Even people that you know very well, you might not know how they're going to behave in certain situations. So what we do in recruitment is fundamentally difficult. And all that we're trying to do is just reduce those errors. So bringing people in that we think are going to be good and that are going to fail and increase our hit rates. So my very obvious truth that the world is changing. In HR, there's lots of things that we talk about, particularly in recruitment, that you'll be very familiar with, and I won't go on and on about. But things like we've got all these millennials coming into our organisations, we've got baby boomers retiring, the demographic is changing, and that has huge impacts on us in terms of attraction, recruitment, and retention. There's also things like the internet that are making our jobs better, but also a lot more difficult in lots of ways. So things like wiki jobs and Glassdoor. So whereas previously people might go out and tell family and friends about a recruitment experience, now they can go out and tell thousands of people. And we know that people like to share bad experiences. So that means that we're under the spotlight. Everything that we do in recruitment now is on the web. It's out there. So we need to be really aware of that. And if you don't check those sites regularly, I definitely advise go and have a look at your organisation, see what people are saying, because that's a really good insight into what you're doing and whether you're doing it well or not. Similarly, it's so easy now to upload a CV online, and you get into your inbox in Monday morning, and there's 5 different people saying, we've got a perfect job for you, your CV is already here, just click to apply. We know that on average, people have about 3 CVs already online. So that's 1, if I lost my job tomorrow and I need something desperately, just give me anything. There's another that's, this would be a step up, and I'd like to, if something came up, that would be interesting to look at. This is kind of what might be the next step for me. And then there's an ideal, so this is what I'm really reaching for. If this job came up, I don't want it passed me by. So your employees in your organisation are likely to have 3 CVs already up there. They're passive candidates, and we've got to be really aware of that. But what it means in recruitment is that we can get hundreds and thousands more applicants than we ever did before, which is great. We've got more talent wanting to join us, but actually it's really, really difficult to then find out who are the hidden heroes within that. So it's getting a lot more difficult, but these are obvious truths. We know about this stuff, and we're trying to take action to take account of this. But what I would say is actually what is happening in your organisation, what is happening in the world that's changing jobs that we perhaps aren't so aware of. So are there even roles in your company that haven't changed on paper, but that have actually changed fundamentally in terms of what people are doing and what good looks like? So to illustrate that, I'm going to tell you a story about car salespeople. And I apologise, but I'm going to ask you to be really, really stereotypical and tell me what words come to mind and shout them out when you think about car salespeople. Yeah? Yeah, cheesy. Shark, yes. Quite negative connotations. And there's some research that Dan Pink did. I don't know if you've read any of Dan Pink's stuff, but very, very good author. Has a great book on called Drives, which is about motivation. Another book called To Sell Is Human. And in that, he looks at car salespeople. And he went out to the American public and said, what's the one word you think of when you think of car salespeople? And they came up with all of these different words. And the bigger the word, the more people said it. And we've already had it come up, but yeah, the biggest word was pushy. And lots and lots of negative things. And he said, that's really, really interesting. And we can all think of this kind of profile of a car salesperson. That's quite typical, isn't it? And we've probably all interacted with them. What he said is that right? Because the knowledge economy has changed in the motor industry. So I now don't want to go into a car sales forum and have a car salesperson tell me about a car and try and convince me to buy it. Because by the time I go down to a showroom, I already know how fast the car's going to go, how many miles per gallon it's going to do, what I should be paying for it. I can find out all that information myself. So when I actually go in and interact with these individuals, I want to have a different conversation. I want to talk about what I'm looking for in a car. I want to have that relationship, and I want them to listen to me and not try and push me into something. And yet we still think of this type of people, and perhaps we still see these types of people in our car sales forums. So at the same time I was reading this book, Ford came to us and said, we've got a bit of a problem with our car salespeople. I said, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me about them. And they said, well, we know what good car salespeople look like because we're Ford. Okay, we've recruited them for years and years. In the UK, we recruit 200 new car salespeople a year. We know what they're like. They're confident extroverts, the types of people you would expect to be successful. And yet they're not performing the same. We get some that seem to be brilliant and some that are average and some that are really, really poor. What's going on? How can we find consistently good people? So first off, I said, well, what do you do? How do you recruit them at the moment? And they kind of were a bit nervous and said, oh, we do lots of good stuff that you're meant to do, but probably what really happens is somebody comes in and has a conversation in a car sales room with a manager that says, have you sold cars before? And if they say, yeah, they say, great, how many have you sold? And if they say, well, I've sold lots of cars before, they say, great, can you start on Monday? And they said, we don't want that to be the situation, but that is what happens. And actually, these managers started out as car salespeople 5, 10, 15 years ago. They know what good car salespeople look like. And I said, okay, well, there might be something else going on here. Let's have a little look. So we got just over 200 of their car salespeople, and we looked at them. We spent a lot of time. We did focus groups with them. We did interviews. We looked at assessment data and their performance data. And what we found was that they were quite nice people that did really, really well as car sales. They were quite consultative, so they wanted to listen lots. They built empathy. They made really good relationships. And so having read this damn pink book, I thought that's exactly the type of person that I want to go in and work with if I'm going to buy a car. But I need to go back to Ford, who know a hell of a lot more about car salespeople than I do, and tell them that you confident extroverts aren't you successful people, and you need to completely change what you've been looking for. So I was a little bit nervous, and I thought, oh, how's this going to go? And I went in and I spoke to HR, and they said, absolutely what we wanted you to come back and say. We know that this is true because we know that this profile has changed. And actually, what we've done before is look at recognise car salespeople and how many cars they've sold. And that's what our hiring managers do. But what is important is not just how many cars you sell, but also customer service. So we know we've got lots of people that are top sellers who are actually pushing people into buying cars that don't want the cars, that are then going out and talking really negatively about Ford, that maybe even calling up our organisation and saying, I've bought this car, am I locked in because I want to return it, it wasn't what I wanted. That isn't what they were looking for, it was this balance. So actually the profile of success had changed. But they said, the reason we really got you in, and we didn't tell you any of this, was that the rest of Ford know a lot more about cars than us, and a lot of people that make these decisions are people that used to be car salespeople. So how are we going to convince them that confident extroverts aren't necessarily the way forward? And I said, well, I've got some really great data. I know that people that meet our profile of a successful car person bring in £75,000 a year per person. Would that change their minds? And they said, yes, give us that data, let's go and talk to them. And so we changed the process for Ford. But what it also did, and I think in my sad little world, that £75,000 is great, but what was really interesting was that they were able to centralise the process. They were able to bring consistency and reliability and actually fairness into the process. But even more interesting, they didn't have to just look at people that sold cars before. So their talent pool was blown completely wide open. It didn't matter if you sold a car before, it mattered if you met that profile. And after a couple of months, they came back to us and said, we've actually now started to change our attraction process because we're not looking for people that have sold cars before. What we found is things like mothers returning to work make excellent car salespeople. They build great rapport and they ask the right questions and people trust them. So now we're going out and targeting mothers that want to come back into the workplace and lots of different groups that they wouldn't have looked at before. So even though we'd kind of refined what they were looking for, the talent pool had widened massively and had completely changed. And I quite like the fact that the press then picked this up and ran with it and called it death of the old style salesman. And I want to say, yeah, it is the death of the old style salesman. We're looking for saleswomen now and people that are returning to work. But it completely changed quite a traditional role on paper. That role hasn't changed over the years. But in reality, the world has changed around it. So what success looks like in that role has changed. And that's the challenge. Think about those roles in your organisation and think about, are we reviewing them regularly? And I would say every 3 to 5 years, as a minimum, we should actually be looking at these roles and saying, have they fundamentally changed? Do we need to think differently about how we recruit them and what we're looking for? So, finding your hidden heroes. I've just come up with a few quick things that actually are worth going away and asking within your organisation to just think about here. So what does success look like? I often talk to clients who will say, what does success look like? And they'll tell me, well, we collect this performance data, and then I'll have a conversation around what does somebody good looks like, and it won't match up. And that was the situation with Ford. They collected a lot of performance data on sales, and that was their main criteria. But what they were telling me was that they really wanted people that were good salespeople, but actually offered really great customer service. So are you tracking the right data? Do you know what success looks like? Do you know what makes somebody good at the role? And that's really difficult, and it's easy to say, yeah, well, I know that Ben in marketing is really great, but why? Why are they so good? What makes them really good? And that's why they're hidden heroes, because we might have this feeling that they're good, but how do we actually narrow that down? Are they different to average and poor performers? So this is a really important point. With Ford, everybody in the car sales population was quite high on things like resilience, which you'd kind of expect from salespeople. They're going to get a lot of knockbacks. But the poor and the average performers were high on that, and the good performers were. So that wasn't what differentiated. So yeah, we want to bring people in that are high on resilience, but actually it was those other factors, those empathy, the consultative nature, that really made a difference. And also think about how the job might change in the next 6 to 12 months. So for me, that would be bringing in people that are looking forward to the future strategy of the organisation to make sure that we aren't just recruiting for today, but we're actually looking at what's going to happen, how might people need to be different in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months, and recruit against that. And I've got a little exercise. It isn't something that you can do now, but you can take away and have a little play with. And these are actually, it's based on a competency card. So we have packs of these that you can, we've got some packs you can grab, but also if you let us know, we can send them out to you. Essentially, this is about looking at what does good look like, and it's something that you can go in, particularly if you're trying to change people's perceptions or you don't know what good looks like. Bring in people that are doing the role, get their buy-in to this new process. And essentially, obviously involve HR, it's important, but bring in line managers, bring in people that are actually doing the job now, and you might even bring in senior stakeholders that are looking at the future strategy. Get them in a room and do a simple card sorting exercise. So take the role in question and just talk about it. What does it look like? Who's great at it? And you'll get people coming out, and then you want to start using that to feed out what are these competencies that are really important. So how we do that is something like this. So you've got a set of importance cards that go from a critical importance to not relevant. So you get a big table and you put those out down one side so you can see, okay, that's my kind of criteria. Then you want to know how often does this behaviour need to occur in the role. So from consistently demonstrated to never demonstrated. And you set it up a little bit like this. So you've got kind of an idea of your framework here. And then you want to take these people, say, take the role, and they might have said, well, Ben's really great. Okay, tell me about Ben. What does he do? And you want to use that as an example. Compare them against poor and average performers. And take, these are, the competencies that we use, but these could be your own competencies that you've already got in the organisation. And actually say, does this make somebody really, really good or not? So you have a conversation around each of these and place it in the relevant area. And you continue to do this until you've built up a really good idea of what good looks like. And you might have already known what this looks like, but it's getting other people to buy into it. So if you've got the Ford sales managers going through this process, as we actually did at the time, saying, it's somebody that's really communicative, that talks loads and can kind of get on with people. Okay, they've built that profile. We've backed it up with the data, but they bought into it. So they're then going to be more likely to actually recruit against it. You can include other things, so ability assessments that we know are going to be important. So for Ford, being quite high on verbal reasoning was really important to the role. They don't have to be incredibly high on it, but they need a certain level to be able to do their job successfully. Again, put those into the relevant area, and then you've got a profile to recruit against. So just a nice little exercise that, as I say, you can take away and use, and we've got some cards around if you want to do that. But hopefully that's given you a little bit of insight into how you might start thinking differently about recruitment and perhaps a template for recruiting in the future. So, any questions?
Thank you very much, Lucy. It was great. Everyone.